2014, a man named Peter Serra stabbed another man 7 times across his torso for an act he perceived as disrespectful. He later writes in prison journal, "Toxic masculinity ruined my life. It destroyed relationships, devastated my family. I know I'm not the only person who let his toxic ideas of what it means to be a man destroy his own humanity." But hold on, I think I skipped ahead. The real story begins way back, something like this.
Jeffrey is a weak modern man.
Couldn't shake off this image of all these simps.
Imagine this guy being drafted to war. He would shit himself.
Scantily dressed paralytic woman and salivating droog-like man.
One's a pussy. Everybody.
Boy gets sent to school where he's raised by an obese female teacher.
From childhood, we are monitored on the playground for any misbehavior or boyish tendencies.
We're raised spending more time around moms than they were around their fathers.
The emasculation of the Western man.
Is the summary. According to self-help gurus, modern men are emasculated, they are weak, their masculinity is repressed, and they are. Not only that, attacks continue to your present life, cursing
we
the
run
present.
until that animal falls to its knees in exhaustion, and now we have McDonald's.
Because of the efficiency at which we can get the things that we need.
Say there's human reward systems that are not being met.
They were playing video games and watching non-stop television.
Unnecessary
Your edge is where you stop
entrepreneurial
short,
mindset.
where you compromise your fullest gift.
How much time you waste and redirect all that same time into that singular goal of becoming wealthy.
Ambition and do something with your life.
And entire channels dedicated to modern men shaming.
Who's fallen victim to the mob.
Attack of this magnitude. But why? They use the mixture of things to cast guilt. First, look at their high energy.
The first thing you do is you call a toxically masculine police officer to turn up with a weapon to protect.
Getting scratched in the face and still facing that fight.
Then they use perspectives. When they say things like modern men, today's men, or where you are in life, they use images like these. Then they compare with ideal men, men from past, or what you should do, using images like these. Comparing men then versus now, except I can easily swap images. And then my favorite trick, sex shaming. Shaming someone around their sex or what they do.
Rubbing their pee on their blanket.
Switching from looking at ass on Instagram to underage girls on TikTok to fake taxi and incest videos on porn. Jeffrey willingly castrates himself, adopting the self-image of being a father.
Simps scattered around the world, submitting their money and soul for a tit pic. An endless line of weasels congregating around their idol belled out theme of worship, begging thoughts for
Sex
recognition.
shaming someone around their sex for what they do. As the School of Life review says,
Sexual desire is one of the most personal and vulnerable things that we are ever called upon to express, and it exposes one to emotionally momentous degrees of ridicule. As bullies of all kinds have always known, if you want to destroy someone fast, shame them around their sexuality. They'll never have the self-confidence to challenge you again.
you remember a moment ago I said, attack of this magnitude. But why? Because in the name of self-help, their self-help follows a very particular method. See, this is you, your mind, your beliefs, all that is you. What self-help gurus do is attack all that is you, saying this is bad, abandon this, and now join the race to become better. But here's the kicker. Do you really think you can get rid of all this to become better? According to Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, everything you label as bad and undesirable in you is pushed into a psychological prison of subconscious mind and becomes part of your shadow, a part of yourself that you have lost. You can't ever get rid of this. You can only attack and distort this and make it miserable to become better. First they sell you an illusory problem.
We are simply put not the men our fathers are.
Why do you think this message of the boy crisis, some people have a hard time listening to?
Games on Netflix, junk food.
When they sell you their solution
of strength, courage, and mastery.
The hallmark of a real man is controlling himself.
Drive and ambition has a goal and a business that they're working.
Their fake virtue.
You need to be smart. You need to be strong. You need to be intelligent. You need to be funny. As a man.
Young men who
Men.
A man's
Their man virtue. Nobody knows the origin of this, but you know how it goes, starting from Gillette.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity. Is this the best a man can get?
To classic masculinity, the man virtue is exploited by self-help gurus.
It's the most unattractive trait a man can have. And if you're anything like the average man...
The thing is, we are spinning on a giant piece of rock, purposeless, where from universal perspective, nothing really matters. It creates fear and emptiness. So then, you're sold, along with a ton of other virtues, this man virtue, to cope up with the fear and purposelessness. But unlike other virtues, this man virtue is a complete delusion. A man virtue contains few things. A man is one goes to the gym, doesn't fap, confident, in charge of his life, and so on. Except a woman can do him too. Or a transgender. You see, quit social media. Being in charge of your life isn't bad in and on itself. But when I detach him, take him out of the man virtue, what's left? Does it have any independent existence? Man delusion completely falls apart. As Alan Watts summarizes,
so therefore beware of virtue. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, the highest virtue is not virtue, and therefore really is virtue. But inferior virtue cannot let go of being virtuous, and therefore is not virtue. Translated in more of a periphrastic way, the highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. In other words, when you breathe, you don't congratulate yourself on being virtuous. But breathing is a great virtue. It's living. But the other virtues are stuck on. They're ersatz, they're imitation virtues. And they usually create trouble.
But wait, there's something else. When you see a horror movie, you fear seeing ghosts in real life. Now tell me, how many times in this video did you saw flame? From now on, every time I'll drop a flame, you'll take note. At every moment, your brain is flooded with information, so it has a filter, a selective focus. With modern man-shamers, when they call entire population of men weak and presents you selected evidences supporting the claim, then even your brain, a selective focus, immediately starts presenting you evidences, your past history, people you know supporting the claim and completely rejecting ones that don't support the claim. Hence a delusion. All modern men, including you, are weak, is implanted. At this point in time, men of all diversities are there. But modern man virtuists brings our attention to this, casts guilt over it, and says every man on earth is this, hence creating an unnecessary crisis, a form of insanity. In book Healing from Hate, How Men Get Into and Out of Violent Extremism, Michael Kimmel examines the multiple roles that masculinity has on these young recruits. Kimmel unveils how white extremist groups wield masculinity to recruit and retain members and prevent members from exiting the movement. These young men feel a sense of righteous indignation, victims in the world suddenly dominated by political correctness. Their birthright has been upended, they say, and violent extremist groups leverage masculinity to manipulate one's despair into white supremacist and neo-Nazi hatred, all to take their manhood back. Except this time they use man virtue to make you join their cult, sell their course, subscribe to their channel, all in name of self-help. At the beginning of this video, I've opened some unclosed loops.
We run until that animal falls to its knees in exhaustion, and now we have McDonald's.
Because of the efficiency at which we can get the things that we need.
You see there's human reward systems that are not being met.
They grew up playing video games. And
For a moment,
nonstop
let's
television.
talk about men who are closest to natural men, the real men, soldiers.
We have no Great War, no Great Depression.
Until recently, the Department of Veterans Affairs was reporting that we were losing 22 veterans a day to suicide. Let's look at what we know about soldiers. They're not good at asking for help. They wear camouflage that allows them to hide in plain sight, but so too are they able to hide their feelings and emotions, pain and sorrow in plain sight. And because we believe that they are strong, we don't always do a good job of checking in on them to see how they're doing. And despite what we've been told, soldiers are not invincible.
It feels like the old vet is actually a man and the young lad is a pussy. No offence, but he kept talking about mental health and BS. So mental health, BS. The old man served in World War II and did not complain once. If you can't handle death in a war, then don't go in the army. I don't know where to start with this. The old man is actually a man, doesn't talk about it once. The reason he doesn't talk about it is because maybe he doesn't know how to talk about it. And the people like him that are my age that don't talk about mental health because they don't want to be a pussy, they then suffer with it and then they kill themselves because they think that they're being a pussy by talking about it.
Hence the scene. Modern men are emasculated, they are weak, their masculinity is repressed, and they are. But truth's quite the opposite. Look back to your childhood. Remember these? Even my female class teacher once told me, "You walk like a girl. Why do you walk like this?" Masculinity is quite extensively promoted. Just one question remains. Are they evil? Juvenoia. It's a term coined by sociologist David Franklor, is an exaggerated fear of things that influence youth these days.
Here's an engraving from 1627 admonishing the now compared to the ways of old. In the early 1900s, Romain Rolland complained that the new generation of young people were, quote, passionately in love with pleasure and violent games, easily duped. New people and the direction society is headed in has always been seen with some disapproval. XKCD famously collected a brief history of juicy examples. In 1871, the Sunday magazine published a line that may as well have been written today about texting. Now, we fire off a multitude of rapid and short notes instead of sitting down to have a good talk over a real sheet of paper. And the Journal of Education in 1907 lamented that at a modern family gathering, silent around the fire, each individual has his head buried in his favorite magazine. Point is, there's nothing new under the sun.
2008 study of nearly 4,000 Australian professionals found that there were differences between generations, but they were often small, and usually not the ones that stereotypes would have predicted. Baby boomers, for instance, were expected to be high-achieving, but they were actually the least focused on career advancement. Instead, the younger, quote-unquote, lazier generations, I gesture to you, were the most driven. Similarly, a 2012 study found that there were far fewer actual differences between generations than people from those generations perceived there being.
And speaking of modern men shaming other modern men, they have been sold juvenoia in excess by the members of previous generation, and yet ultimately no one is evil cause they truly embody and believe in what they say. They practice the hate they preach. Just the victims of juvenoia, thanks to its excess promotion in newspaper, Instagram, and everywhere across the internet and day-to-day life.